My aunt froze my bank account to stop me from buying a house with my life savings. Family comes first, she said, but I had a shocking plan up my sleeve. I had spent years working hard, saving every dollar, and carefully planning for the day I could finally buy my own home. It was supposed to be a moment of independence, a fresh start. But just as I was about to close the deal, my bank account was mysteriously frozen. Confused and panicked, I called the bank, only to hear something that made my blood run cold. My aunt had locked my account. Her reasoning? Family comes first. She claimed I was being selfish for wanting to move out instead of helping her and my cousins financially. Apparently, in her mind, my hard-earned savings weren't mine to spend. I was supposed to hand them over for the sake of family. I felt betrayed. She had no right to control my money, and I wasn't about to let her ruin my dream. But instead of arguing, I played along, pretending to be defeated while secretly putting together a plan she'd never see coming. She thought she had one, but she had no idea what I was about to do next. Let's just say by the time I was done, she would regret ever messing with my future. At first, I couldn't believe it. My own aunt had done this to me. She had taken control of something that wasn't hers, and now my dream of buying a home was slipping through my fingers. I sat there staring at my phone, rereading the bank representative's words in my mind. Your account has been frozen due to a request from a cosigner. Cosigner. That's when it hit me. Years ago, when I had first opened my savings account, my parents insisted on adding my aunt as a cosigner for safety reasons. I had completely forgotten about it. And now she was using it against me. I clenched my jaw, my heart pounding. I needed to stay calm. If I confronted her right away, she would just double down. Maybe even find a way to drain my account entirely. No, I needed to be smart. I needed to think one step ahead. I called my bank again, asking them if there was any way to remove her from my account. But the answer was frustrating. Only the cosigner can voluntarily remove themselves, or you'll need legal action. Legal action would take time, and I didn't have time. My closing date was just days away. Feeling trapped, I decided to pay my aunt a visit. I needed to see how she would react when confronted in person. Maybe there was a small chance I could talk her into fixing this. When I arrived at her house, she opened the door with a smug smile, as if she had been expecting me. Oh, sweetheart, I knew you'd come running back. You were always a little too independent for your own good. I forced a polite smile, but my hands were shaking. Why did you do it? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. She sighed dramatically, crossing her arms. Because you're being selfish. Buying a house when your family is struggling? Really? How could you even think about leaving when we need you? I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. So, you thought freezing my account would teach me a lesson? She shrugged. It's for your own good. Family comes first. You don't need a house right now. But we need help. Anger bubbled up inside me. I had worked tirelessly for this money. I had sacrificed nights out, vacations, and every unnecessary expense to save up for my future. And now she was acting like I owed it to her? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed. You have no right to do this, I said, my voice low but firm. That money is mine and I'm getting it back. Her expression darkened. You're being dramatic. Once you understand that family comes before money, you'll see I did the right thing. I knew then that reasoning with her was useless. She truly believed she was entitled to my savings, and she wasn't going to give up control willingly. But she had underestimated me. I walked out of her house without another word, my mind racing. If I couldn't convince her to unfreeze my account, I needed to find another way. The first thing I did was dig through all my financial records, looking for any possible loophole that would allow me to regain control. That's when I discovered something interesting. There had been a deposit into my account just days before it was frozen. A deposit I hadn't made. I immediately called the bank again, asking about the transaction. The representative told me the deposit had come from my aunt's account. My stomach twisted. She had put money into my account right before locking it? Why? Then it clicked. By depositing money, she had given herself an excuse to claim she had a financial stake in my savings. It was all part of her plan. I needed to act fast. My closing date was approaching, and I couldn't afford to lose my dream home. I started making calls to lawyers, hoping to find someone who could help me navigate this mess. Most told me it would take weeks, even months, to resolve something like this. I didn't have that kind of time. That's when an idea struck me. If she had deposited money into my account, that meant she had also left a trail. I called the bank again and asked for a transaction history. When I received the report, I noticed something odd. Right after she deposited money into my account, she had transferred the exact same amount out of hers. She had made it look like she was putting money in, but in reality, she had just moved it around to make it seem like she had contributed to my savings. It was all a trick. Armed with this information, I contacted the bank's fraud department. I calmly explained the situation, providing all the transaction details. The representative on the other end of the line listened carefully before saying, "This definitely looks suspicious. We'll need to investigate." That was all I needed. I knew my aunt thought she had everything under control, but she had made one critical mistake. She had tried too hard to justify her actions. And now the bank was involved. I didn't tell her what I had done. I wanted her to think she had one, at least for a little while longer. But deep down I knew the clock was ticking. Days passed and I could feel the tension rising. My aunt kept calling me, acting as if nothing was wrong, asking if I had come to my senses. I played along, pretending I was still thinking things over, all while waiting for the bank's response. Then one afternoon I received the call I had been waiting for. "After reviewing your case, we have determined that the co-signer's actions were not in compliance with banking policies. We are taking immediate steps to unfreeze your account." Relief flooded over me. I was back in control. But I wasn't done yet. My aunt had tried to take away my future, and I wasn't about to let her walk away without consequences. I had a plan, one that would ensure she never tried to pull something like this again. She thought she was the one calling the shots, but she had no idea what was coming next. The moment I got off the phone with the bank, a wave of relief washed over me. But I knew better than to celebrate just yet. My aunt had already crossed so many lines. If she found out I had regained access to my account, there was no telling what she'd do next. I needed to stay one step ahead. Instead of transferring my money right away, I decided to be cautious. I went to the bank in person, withdrew a large portion of my savings, and opened a brand new account at a completely different bank. This time I made sure I was the only one with access. No co-signers, no loopholes, just me. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed. It was my aunt. I let it ring. I already knew what she wanted. She was probably expecting me to finally give in, to agree that she was right and hand over my savings like some obedient child. But she had no idea that I had already outmaneuvered her. Then just minutes later I got a text from my cousin, her son. "Mom's freaking out. Says you did something shady with the bank. What's going on?" So she knew. I smirked to myself. It hadn't even been an hour since the bank took action, and she was already losing her grip. She must have tried to access my account, and realized she no longer had control. I could only imagine the look on her face when she found out her plan had completely fallen apart. But I wasn't about to respond. I wanted her to sit with that uncertainty. That night my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls, messages, even voice notes, one after another. My aunt was relentless. She accused me of betraying the family, of making selfish decisions, of disrespecting her after everything she had done for me. As if freezing my account without my permission had been some kind of favor. I ignored her, but deep down, I knew she wasn't going to let this go. She had expected to win, and now that she hadn't, she was going to make sure I paid for it in another way. And I was right. The next morning, I woke up to another message from my cousin. "Mom says she's getting a lawyer involved. She's saying you stole money from the family." I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Was she serious? Did she really think she could twist the story like that? I knew my aunt well enough to know that she thrived on manipulation. She always played the victim, always made sure people saw her as the one who was wronged. And now she was trying to paint me as the villain in my own story. I needed to get ahead of this. The first thing I did was gather all my financial records. Every deposit, every transaction, every piece of proof that showed the money was mine and mine alone. I wasn't about to let her drag me into a legal battle over something that was rightfully mine. Then I made a call to a lawyer of my own just in case. He assured me that as long as I had proof, she didn't have a case. But that didn't mean she wouldn't try to make my life miserable in other ways. Sure enough, later that day, my aunt started reaching out to other family members, spinning her own version of the story. Suddenly, I was getting messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "Why are you doing this to your aunt? She's always been there for you. You're tearing this family apart over money? How could you be so selfish?" Selfish. That was the word she kept using. It didn't matter that I had worked for years to save up for my future. It didn't matter that I had never asked her for a dime. In her mind, I owed her simply because we were family. And worst of all, some people believed her. I started hearing whispers that I had turned my back on the family, that I was greedy, that I had let money change me. It was infuriating. But more than anything, it was exhausting. I could have fought back. I could have told everyone the truth, sent them the proof, exposed my aunt for what she had done. But I knew that wouldn't work. People like her thrived on drama, and the more I engaged, the more power I gave her. So instead, I did something she never expected. I stayed quiet. I didn't defend myself, didn't argue, didn't feed into the chaos she was trying to create. And slowly, people started to realize there was more to the story than what she was telling them. But my aunt? She was getting desperate. And that's when she took things even further. I came home one evening to find a letter taped to my door. It was from a lawyer. A formal demand for a family reimbursement. I stared at the paper, barely able to believe what I was reading. She was actually trying to claim that I owed her money, that I had wrongfully withheld funds that should have gone to supporting the family. I laughed out loud. It was ridiculous. Legally, she had no case. But that wasn't the point. She wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to wear me down, to make my life difficult until I gave in. She wanted to break me. But what she didn't know was that I had one final move left to make. And when I was done, she would never be able to pull something like this again. Holding the letter in my hands, I could feel my heart pounding, but not from fear. I was angry, angrier than I had ever been. My aunt had already taken things too far, but this? A legal demand for money that wasn't hers? It was the final straw. I knew exactly what she was trying to do. She didn't care about actually winning a case. She just wanted to make my life so miserable that I would cave in and give her what she wanted. But she had underestimated me. I took a deep breath, calming the fire inside me. If she wanted to play games, I was going to make sure she lost. Instead of responding, I went straight to my lawyer. He barely looked at the letter before shaking his head. "This is nonsense," he said. "She has no legal grounds to demand anything." That was all I needed to hear. I told him I wanted to shut this down permanently. No more warnings, no more chances. I was done letting her push me around. Meanwhile, my aunt was still trying to control the narrative. She had convinced a few more relatives that I was the one causing problems, but the cracks in her story were starting to show. People were asking questions, realizing that her version of events didn't quite add up. And when she saw that she was losing support, she did what manipulators always do: she escalated. One night, my cousin called me in a panic. "Mom's saying she's going to take this to court," he said. "She's telling everyone you stole from the family fund." I almost laughed. Family fund? There was no such thing. If anything, my aunt had a long history of borrowing money from relatives and conveniently forgetting to pay them back. And now she was acting like my savings had somehow belonged to everyone? It was getting ridiculous. But what really got to me was that some people actually believed her. The thought of my own family looking at me like I was some kind of thief made my stomach turn. That's when I decided to turn the tables. Instead of waiting for her next move, I made one of my own. I had my lawyer draft a formal response, not just rejecting her demands but making it clear that if she continued with these false claims, I would be the one taking legal action for fraud and financial manipulation. I had the proof. The forged deposit she made into my account, the suspicious transactions, the unauthorized freezing of my money, all of it. And I was ready to use it. When she received the letter, I expected another dramatic meltdown. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. She went silent. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was almost eerie. For someone who had been so determined to make my life a nightmare, her sudden quietness was unsettling. But I knew better than to let my guard down. My aunt was like a storm. Just because things were calm didn't mean the worst was over. It just meant she was waiting for the right moment to strike again. And I was right. A few days later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a social media post, one that made my blood run cold. My aunt had taken her lies public. She had written a long emotional post about how I had betrayed the family, how I had taken advantage of her kindness, how she had only tried to help me and I had turned my back on them. She painted herself as the victim, claiming that all she ever wanted was to keep the family together. But I had become obsessed with money and abandoned the people who raised me. And the worst part? People were eating it up. Dozens of comments from distant relatives and family friends were pouring in. "How could they do this to you? You don't deserve this. Family is everything." It was like watching a wildfire spread. And I had to act fast before it consumed everything. I knew confronting her publicly would only fuel the drama, so instead I gathered every piece of proof I had. Bank records, messages, even recordings of our conversations. If she wanted to turn this into a spectacle, then I would let the truth speak for itself. But before I could make my next move, something happened that changed everything. One of my relatives, someone I least expected, reached out with a message that stopped me in my tracks. "I need to talk to you. There's something you don't know about your aunt." I stared at the message on my phone, my pulse quickening. "There's something you don't know about your aunt." For a moment I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to hear anything else about her. I had already dealt with enough. But the way the message was worded made it impossible to ignore. This wasn't just another opinion about the situation. Felt like a warning. I called the number back, and an older cousin picked up. We hadn't spoken in years, but his voice was serious. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but after seeing everything she's doing to you, I can't stay quiet anymore, he said. You need to know the truth. I sat down, bracing myself. What truth? There was a long pause, as if he was trying to figure out the best way to say it. Then he finally spoke. She's done this before. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? I mean, you're not the first person she's tried to steal from. She's pulled this same stunt on other family members, especially younger ones who had savings. She gets close to them, convinces them she's looking out for their best interests, and then little by little she takes control. Sometimes it's freezing accounts. Other times it's guilt-tripping them into handing over their money. And if that doesn't work, she makes their lives hell until they give in. My stomach turned. This wasn't just about me. My aunt had a pattern. Who else did this happen to? I asked, gripping my phone. He sighed. You remember our cousin Rachel? I did. She had moved away years ago, practically cutting ties with the family. Nobody ever talked about why. Same story, he continued. She had a college fund. Our aunt convinced her to let her help manage it. Next thing she knew, the money was gone. When Rachel tried to fight back, our aunt turned the family against her. Made her look like the ungrateful one. It got so bad that Rachel just packed up and left. She never looked back. I felt sick. Everything suddenly made sense. Why my aunt was so confident she could win. Why she wasn't afraid of making a scene. She had done this before and it had worked, but this time she had picked the wrong person. Rachel never tried to get her money back? I asked. She tried, he said. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the emotional toll. The way our aunt manipulated everyone, twisted the story, it drained her. She decided it wasn't worth the fight. He paused. But you're different. You're actually standing up to her. And that's why she's panicking. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. If my aunt had a history of doing this, then who knew how many others had been victims? And worse, who knew how many more she might try to do this to in the future? This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. This was about stopping her. For good, but before I could even think of my next move, my cousin spoke again. One more thing, he said, his voice lower now. Be careful. She's desperate. And when she gets desperate, she gets reckless. The line went dead. I set my phone down, my hands trembling. My aunt had already proven she was willing to lie, manipulate, and drag my name through the mud. But if she was truly as reckless as my cousin said, how far was she willing to go? I was about to find out. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. My aunt had gone completely silent, which, after everything, felt more unsettling than the constant attacks. I knew she wasn't giving up. She was just plotting her next move. Then, one evening, I got a call from my lawyer. You're not going to believe this, he said. Your aunt just filed a formal claim, stating that you mismanaged family assets and owe her a financial reimbursement. I nearly dropped my phone. She was actually trying to take this to court. She has no case, my lawyer reassured me. But she's banking on the idea that you'll be too overwhelmed to fight back. I exhaled slowly, my hands tightening into fists. She really thought she could wear me down, just like she had done to Rachel and probably others before me. But this time things were different. I had proof, I had support, and most importantly, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The next day I sent my lawyer every piece of evidence I had. Bank statements, text messages, even screenshots of her contradicting herself in social media posts. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose her. Then, just when I thought I was ready for anything, something unexpected happened. My cousin called me again, his voice urgent. You need to check your email. Now. Confused, I opened my inbox and there it was. An anonymous email with an attachment. No message, no subject line. Just a file labeled evidence. I clicked on it and what I saw made my jaw drop. It was a scanned document, a loan agreement. Between my aunt and a private lender, and the amount? Almost the exact total of what she had tried to take from my account. She hadn't been trying to protect family assets. She had been in deep financial trouble herself. And she was trying to use my savings to cover her own debts. I sat there stunned. All this time I had been thinking she wanted control, power over me. But in reality, she had been drowning. And she had been willing to ruin me just to save herself. I forwarded the document to my lawyer immediately. This changes everything, he said. Not only does this prove her financial motive, but it could also be legal fraud if she was planning to use your money to settle personal debts without your knowledge. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. She had dug her own grave. By the time the legal proceedings began, she barely showed up. The moment my lawyer presented the evidence, The fraudulent transactions, the fake claims, and now this secret loan. Her case completely fell apart. And then came the final twist. Just as the dust was settling, I got another call. This time it wasn't from my lawyer or my cousin. It was from Rachel. "I heard what you did," she said, her voice filled with something I hadn't expected, relief. I thought no one would ever stand up to her. I smiled, realizing something. This wasn't just about winning a case. This was about breaking a cycle. My aunt had spent years preying on family, manipulating people, and getting away with it. But this time she had lost. And as for me, my bank account was safe. My house was still mine to buy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt freed as I hung up the phone with Rachel. A wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, exhaustion, and an odd sense of closure. This entire ordeal had pushed me further than I ever thought I could go. But I had come out on the other side stronger. My aunt had spent years manipulating people. But for once, she had faced real consequences. I wasn't sure what would happen to her now. The case against me had crumbled. And with the proof of her financial troubles, her credibility within the family was shattered. I knew she wouldn't come running to apologize. People like her never did. But in a way it didn't matter anymore. I had won, and not just in court. I had proven to myself that I wasn't powerless, that I wouldn't be controlled, and that no one, not even family, had the right to take what I had worked so hard for. A few days later, I went to check my bank account, half expecting to feel a pit in my stomach like I had so many times before. But this time all I felt was relief. My money was right where it should be. No unauthorized transactions, no freezes, no surprises. I could finally move forward with my life. That same day, I signed the final paperwork for my house. It was a simple little place. Not a mansion, not extravagant, but it was mine. A place where I could build a future on my own terms. As I held the keys in my hand, I realized that this moment, more than anything, was proof that I had taken back control. In the weeks that followed, word spread about everything that had happened. Family members who had once believed my aunt's lies started reaching out. Some to apologize, some just to check in. My cousin, the one who had warned me, told me that my aunt had gone quiet. No more dramatic posts, no more accusations, just silence. It was like she had finally run out of moves. Rachel and I kept in touch, and for the first time she started reconnecting with family. I think seeing my aunt finally exposed gave her a sense of closure too. She told me she had spent years wondering if she had made the right choice by walking away. Now she didn't have to wonder anymore. One evening, as I was unpacking in my new home, I got another unexpected message. It was from my cousin, the same one who had called me in a panic when this all started. "She's leaving town," the text read. "She burned too many bridges, and people are finally seeing her for who she is. She's moving to stay with a friend in another state." I stared at the screen for a long time. A part of me had expected some grand finale, some last desperate attempt from my aunt to regain control. But instead she was just gone. I didn't feel victorious in the way I thought I would. There was no celebration, no sense of triumph. Just quiet. And maybe that was the real victory, not just beating her at her own game but getting to a place where she didn't matter anymore. As I sat on the floor of my new home, surrounded by unopened boxes and a fresh start, I thought about everything this experience had taught me. I had always believed that family should be trusted, that they would always have my best interests at heart. But I had learned the hard way that not everyone operates that way. Some people, even those who are supposed to love you, will take advantage of you if given the chance. But I had also learned that standing up for myself didn't make me selfish. It didn't make me a bad person. It made me free. I had spent so much time fighting battles I never should have had to fight. Now I was finally done. No more looking over my shoulder, no more second-guessing myself. I was moving forward on my own terms. And as I turned off my phone and looked around my new home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace.